Hello, everyone. Welcome to another special edition of the Bench Sports Podcast. I'm Rafi, joined by hockey insider Alex Vartanyan. Alex, it's a pleasure having you on again. NHL trade deadline is coming gone. I know both of our teams are now gearing up for the playoffs. I say that because we all know the Blackhawks are not going to be making the playoffs. But anyways, with all these trades that have gone down over the past couple of days, let's take some time to break down some of these deals. Alex, before we get into that, how are you doing? I'd assume not great because Jack Hughes is out for the year. Dougie Hamilton is missing more time, and the Devils didn't really make any big splashes. So I'll just hand it off to you. How are you doing? How are you feeling? Outside the Devils, with the Devils, how are
Let
things?
Let's just say we'll get to the Devils later in the podcast. Doing good though. I mean, school's kind of kicking me in the ass right now. I got a lot of work and a lot of school coming on my way. But hey, we're living life. We're having a good time. It's all that matters.
100%, 100%. So let's just get into it. So essentially, the structure of this podcast is just going to be listing off some winners and losers and just discussing who we think really did a good job at the trade deadline, who we think could have done more. We expected them to do a bit more based on their standing and where they are currently in the overall playoff picture. So, Alex, as the guest, I'll give you the first team that you want to talk about, winner or loser, and we'll just dive right into it.
I'm gonna start with the winner here, and first and foremost, this team has gotten a lot of heat lately for being so sleepy and so dead because their GM's a piece of crap, and I hate him. But the New York Islanders are a winner at this deadline. Their main goal was to get younger, and they got younger. They brought in a great prospect in Callum Mitchell. They got rid of one of their best goal scorers. Yes, aging. They brought in a lot of assets before with him too. They only made two trades, including the Dennis Cholesky for Adam Beckman trade. The Devils, even with that trade too, they got younger. They brought in a great offensive guy and a powerful physical guy, Adam Beckman. I'm a Devils fan, so I can say you watch him in the AHL. He's a freaking physical mastermind. Knows what to do with the puck. And I feel like them getting younger, they're finally preparing for a future where it's going to take a longer time to rebuild and retool. And this is only going to get them there. You have prospects in the system; they're going to come up and they're going to be incredible. I love this move for the Islanders. I love the way they did the deadline.
100%. I actually had the Islanders on my list too, and similar to what you said, I literally have in the text that I have in my notes. Lou woke up for once and actually cooked this deadline. So we're both on the same wavelength of oh my gosh, Lou actually did something. And once again, I'm not going to add too much. Adding you trade away Brock Nelson, who's a staple of the Islanders, but he's also 34 years old on an expiring contract. Got bailed out low key because he was going to offer him, I believe, $7 million for 3 years, which to a 34-year-old, you have to look at
Ridiculous,
that.
ridiculous money.
And the price was going to be very high. He set the price quite high. I couldn't have even imagined getting a prospect like Caleb Ritchie and a first round pick. I'm very high on Ritchie. I think he's a potential second line center at his peak, and you also get a first round pick on top of it. So for only 20 games of Brock Nelson plus potentially a playoff run, I think the Islanders did a great job. I completely agree. I'm going to go over to the loser side here, and we'll start off with one loser that I have, and that's a team that's also in the Eastern Conference, and that's the Detroit Red Wings. The Red Wings, as of recording this, it's Tuesday, March 11th. As of now, which takes into account a couple games after the deadline, the Red Wings are 2-7-1 in their last 10. They're on a 6-game losing streak. For some reason, like they got rid of Husso, and that made sense. They had three goalies. You had Lyon, you had Talbot. But then they decided we're going to pick up Peter Mrazek at just over $4 million for this year and next year. And we're going to add a veteran forward in Craig Smith, which I get some depth to the forward group. But the Peter Mrazek addition makes no sense to me if you're the Detroit Red Wings. Especially, like I get if they're trying to upgrade their goaltending, but Peter Mrazek has taken a step back this year. He hasn't been as good as he was last year. Trust me, I've watched almost all the Blackhawks games this year and all Peter Mrazek's games. He's unfortunately taken a step back. And for them to also give up Joseph Valeno, who, albeit fourth liner, not too much, needed a change of scenery. It just didn't make too much sense for me with the Red Wings. I think after missing out on the playoffs last year by 1 point, I really expected Yzerman to take some big steps, take some big swings to get them over the hump when everyone's so close together in the Eastern Conference. But I just feel like their deadline fell short. And then icing on the cake for them as well, the Jake Wallman trade. They attached a
I was
second
about to
round pick
say,
this past summer to trade Jake Wallman, which you look at Justin Hall, you look at adding Shane Gostisbehere, which I have my gripes about. You look at their Ben Chiarot as well. They have so many below average bottom pair defensemen playing around alongside Mort Seider. Their one top four defenseman, Jake Wallman, they decided on a decent contract too. They had a second round pick and ship him off to San Jose. What does San Jose do? Not even a year later, they get a first round pick from the Edmonton Oilers for Jake Wallman. So the asset management for the Red Wings has just been a major red flag for me. Yes, they have some young players too that are slowly going to integrate. Simone Edvinsson, most notably, he's going to get some more load over the next couple of years and will likely still become a top pair defenseman. But for the Red Wings, who I felt this was a big year for them to make a push and make it to the playoffs, I just feel like they fell completely short and were a big loser for me personally.
Can I say one thing though? Adam Sandenpellica is going to be a great prospect for him. He's going to be a
Right, him as
solid
well.
guy in their decor. The one thing with the Red Wings too that I must say is they literally didn't attack their one weakness, and that was a defensive offenseman. They give up way too many goals. Their offenseman never back check. I know as a Blackhawks fan, I guess you're in that area. You got to watch a lot of Red Wings games. Their offensive, their defensive, offensive guys. Their offensive guys don't back check. They're slow. They have a couple of guys who like to just fall back, and it's just watching them play is really boring sometimes because you see it's high scoring, but it's like high scoring games where it shouldn't be high scoring because your offensive guys can't play defense. And that's my one
Right.
gripe by the Red Wings. And it's just every game was like a 5-4 game. It's a thriller, but like it's like it's not fun anymore when all your guys don't know how to back check.
Right, and it just hasn't been helping Sider a lot. He's been taking some steps back. I still think he's a top pair defenseman, and he can be a number one defenseman, but the supporting cast around him, there's just been no support for him. So that's where hopefully an ASP or an Edvinson can step in to help him. But in the immediate future, right now, you needed in our top four defenseman, whether it was picking up an Ivan Provorov from the Blue Jackets or trying to get Connor Murphy from the Blackhawks. I don't know if that necessarily would have happened for a variety of reasons. But anyway, you get the point. Like, pick up a veteran top four D man to help out your franchise cornerstone on the back end. So, yeah, once again, I agree. Moving over, I'll give you the next handoff, loser or winner that you
All
have for the
right.
trade deadline.
I'm gonna go loser here, and kind of a weird pick, but it's more than you think. It's the Vancouver Canucks. Um,
Yep.
they need to sell. They needed to sell this year. They have a lot of guys on expiring deals. Brock Besser being one of them. And the fact that it was a seller's market this year, and the fact that you couldn't capitalize on it being a seller's market, is detrimental to your future. You have guys like Quinn Hughes, Elias Pettersson making north of $10 million. Well, Quinn Hughes, not yet, soon to be though. But you have guys making north of $8-9 million who are either injured or not producing. You have to get rid of dead cap. You have to get rid of guys who are producing, and it's a seller's market. So people will take those bad contracts. People will take guys like Brock Besser because they need to win. I'm going to tie this in together with another loser at the same time, and that's the Devils. As the Devils, I'm going to say this too: the fact that the Devils didn't trade with Brock Besser, the fact that they didn't take some of those guys from the Canucks, is horrible. I mean, their depth is pretty good. They're pretty good depth, but they're kind of dead cap. Um, and the reason why I'm tying it together, not only because of that, is because the Devils need to buy, the Canucks need to sell, and neither of them did anything. And I'm not saying this as a Devils fan. I mean, like some additions to me were great. Like Cody Glass was actually a great pickup for a depth third, fourth line
Scored a
piece.
goal.
Scored a goal, but it's not enough. And you add a guy like Brock Besser, you add a guy like P.S. Suter, you add these guys to your second, third, fourth line, it just grows. So I'm going to tie these two losers together. It's the Devils and the Canucks, and I don't think it's even close when it comes to the worst of the worst losers, considering what their job was at the deadline.
Yeah, I think Patrick Alvin, I don't know if you want to buy or sell what he was saying, but from what he said in his presser, it seemed like they didn't even get a first round pick offered to them for Brock Besser. I find that very hard to believe just
Oh,
with seeing
100%.
Brandon Tanev get a second round pick, seeing just ridiculous players getting ridiculous prices. But I, the same thing happened with Ryan Donato, where apparently no one offered a first round pick for him, even though he was outproducing Brock Nelson, albeit not as consistent as Brock Nelson's been during his career. So the prices were still a little wonky, although a lot of teams were overpaying for bottom six forwards and bottom pair defensemen. But I do agree, the Canucks, they just need to pick a direction at this point. Are you guys going to continue to compete and try to go for it, or are you guys going to look to sell? Selling is, again, very risky. Quinn Hughes, unrestricted free agent in not next year, but I believe the year after. So can
2026,
you
I mean
really do? Can
2027.
you do
Yeah.
a 2 year rebuild? I don't think so. Elias Pettersson. He still hasn't played well even post JT Miller trade. So the Canucks are honestly one of the more interesting teams going into this offseason just because you trade Pettersson. Does Bastard walk? I think highly likely he will be walking this offseason. You didn't get anything for him. Where are the Canucks going right now? It just feels like they're in the mud right now. And again, I agree. They need to pick a direction. I'm going to move over to the positive side, to the winners here. And I think this is very obvious. I don't think there's too much I need to say. But when you add Mikko Rantanen and extend him to $12 million for 8 years, I think you're a winner. Yes, you gave up Logan Stankoven. He is 5'8", a little smaller, but he's shown that he can score and produce at the NHL level. So we love our short kings 100%. And you also only give up 2 first round picks in the future, which will likely be in the back half of the first round. Again, the fact that you don't even get Mikko Rantanen just for the playoffs and the final 20 games, but also for the next 8 years, to only give up Stankoven and 2 firsts is great work for the Dallas Stars. They're really going all in. I am concerned about the right shot defensive position for them
Oh
right
yeah.
now with Miro Heiskanen, who normally plays on his offside on the right side. He's out until the playoffs, might miss the first round of the playoffs as well. And right now, when I'm looking at the roster, Labushkin, Dumba, and CC, that's just not like in an ideal playoff contending team construction, one of those players is playing on the third pair, and the other two are either seventh or eighth defensemen. The fact that they're all getting paid around $3 million on the right shot for their right shot position, that's their big weakness, and they didn't address it. But when you add Mikko Rantanen, you get Mikko Rantanen. So the Stars are going all in. I like this move for them, and I don't know if there's really too much else to discuss with the Dallas Stars being winners.
Can I say the biggest winner of this trade is Jack Roslovic?
100%.
Wore 96 before Mikko Rantanen got there. Rantanen wore the number since he was pretty much in juniors. Was like, hey, I want that number. I'm gonna give you a Rolex for it. Now we get to keep the Rolex, and he's changed back to 96. I think that's just
100%.
chef's
And
kiss.
I do want your thoughts on this as well, because I do know a lot of people were declaring the Hurricanes losers. And I get the whole Mikko Rantanen deal was a complete mess. Don't get me wrong. The past 2-3 weeks, just leading up to the trade, between that acquiring him and then trading him, it was clearly a mess. I didn't think they were going to trade him. To me, it made no sense for them to trade him. But to get Logan Stankoven and 2 first round picks, I think it's still a pretty good return, considering he wasn't going to resign with you. And then in the overall picture as well, you traded Martin Nashis essentially for Logan Stankoven and 2 first round picks. Apparently, they were not getting even like a first round pick for Martin Nashis when they were shopping around this past offseason. So the fact that for a guy who was not going to walk out the door this offseason, but next offseason for sure, in Martin Nashis, the fact that overall, if you draw a box around the entire trades, chemical engineering type of comment right there, but we won't get too technical. If you draw a box around the entire trade and say, okay, you insert Martin Nashis, output Logan Stankoven and 2 first round picks, I think the Hurricanes, with all the drama aside, I think they made out pretty well with that deal. I wonder what your opinions are just in general on it. But I personally, for the Hurricanes, for what they did, I think they're a winner in this scenario.
The one thing with Carolina is that they're in it to win now, and getting Stankoven is great by all means. But in the words of Steve Dangle, those picks are just magic beans. They are magic beans that you can use as assets, yes, but for the most part, I don't think they're going to use them as I do think they're going to use next year's first round pick as an asset, 100%. But this year's, do you think it's kind of too late to think that that's an asset for a trade? Maybe, maybe not. But the one thing, the way I see it, is you get rid of Natchez and you get rid of Rantanen in two separate trades, by all means. But you kind of you were here with Natchez. You go up here with Rantanen and you improve drastically. You in theory, you improved drastically, and we saw that it just did not work out with Carolina at all. I think it was like 7 point. I believe it was 7 points in 14 games, a goal and
Yeah.
6 assists in 7 points in 14 games. You expect them to be at least at 15, 16, 17 points consistently through that first 14 games. You trade him away and you get Stankoven. I'm thinking of more of a present outlook on this in the sense that you're in it to win now. You're in it to just compete at the highest level as much as possible. And you regress, or not regress, but you get worse at a position or in an area where you need to get better at. So, in a way, they kind of won. They got assets out of it, and they got a lot of it. They win for the future. They lose in the present. I think
I
that's the
agree,
way I
and
see it. So if we're
I
talking about just statistically, just this year, they lost.
I agree. I think you can certainly make that argument, especially with the fact too that when that trade was announced, at least in my mind, I was like, Brock Besser. Like they're gonna take their picks. They're gonna acquire Brock Besser. They're gonna go after. Some people were crazy. Were like Elias Pettersson. I'm like, oh, that would be crazy, but I don't think it's gonna happen.
With what
But
cap space? No cap space.
for believe it or not, $36 million next year for the Carolina Hurricanes. They have a boatload of
Well,
cap space.
next year, they're getting rid of a lot. They have a lot of dead cap coming out of the book. So, well, not they have a lot of like bad cap they coming out of the books, which is nice.
Yeah. I was expecting them to actually take a step back this year just because they lost so many pieces to their roster. So I expected this to be a down year anyways. So again, I do agree with you, and I do think that they should have gone after a Brock Besser, tried to shore up that top six in lieu of Mikko Rantanen being traded. But I pin this more as a down year for the Hurricanes in the first place. So I'm not too disappointed. Obviously, this offseason is going to be pretty big for the Hurricanes. And again, as you said, I'd be shocked if the Hurricanes wound up drafting players with both those first round picks and did wind up flipping them. Any other winner or loser you'd like to discuss?
We always said this is a seller's market, and I think the best seller this year was easily the Seattle Kraken. They sold off, and they sold off a lot, and they got a king's ransom in return. They sold off Bjorkstrand, Gord, and Tanev, and they got 2 firsts and 2 seconds for those three guys. And where in a time where Tanev is aging, Gord is aging and not producing at the level that he was with Tampa. Bjorkstrand, he's the one guy where I think like Seattle's going to regret losing because he was kind of a glue guy in that room.
He had turned too. He had another year on his contract as well.
And but the fact that you get assets and you get 2 firsts and 2 seconds, and I'm going to get to Tampa as well because this is going to be ridiculous to say, but I feel like get that much in return for three guys, with one of them has term, the other two really don't and are aging, and one of them making $5 million, and that's Yanni Gordon making $5 million. It's expensive for him, expensive, and you get so much back. And going to Tampa now, you get those guys, and you're pretty much improving your depth. I don't think Tampa's going to be good next year. Is it just me, or I don't think Tampa's going to be good next year? You give up your first next year, and I think it's going to be a lottery pick. I don't think they make the playoffs next year. They're getting older. They're regressing. They don't have guys. I mean, Braden Point's the one guy where I think that Kucherov's getting there in age. He's getting older. You have Braden Point, who's going to be carrying that line. Brandon Hagel. You have good offensive guys, but that defense is very concerning to me. And I feel like adding those two guys and getting rid of 2 firsts for Seattle is so getting rid of two guys, and Gord and Bjorkstrand, and getting 2 firsts and 2 seconds and a second, and then getting Tanev for a second, or getting a second for Tanev as well. That is probably the best seller I have seen at any deadline for the past 3-4 years. It's ungodly what they got.
So first off, for Seattle, just to address that point, Seattle should have been doing this from the get-go, honestly. They got some fool's gold, got into the playoffs their second year, thought they were competing, and then things just haven't panned out. The past couple of years, I would have liked for them to continue to make the playoffs, but it seems like they've taken a step back, and they finally realized, we need to acquire some draft picks. So I'm glad they've come to that realization, but you should have been doing that the past couple of years. For the Lightning, what I will say, I really like both of these additions. I actually had the Lightning as winners. You know what Yanni Gourde is. He's won a Stanley Cup with you. You know what he is. You know where he fits. He knows he's familiar with the team. Most of these players he's played with on past rosters with the Lightning. So he understands things. He's a plug and play. Bjorkstrand is a guy who has term and slots into that top six. He's on pace for 50, 60 points. So it's a good addition up there too. And for a team like the Lightning, you're right. They are getting older. So it's how many more times can you take a crack at winning the Stanley Cup? And for the Lightning right now, you just got to take as many swings as you can. You can't risk having a down year and being short of the goal. You can't miss out on when the Panthers and Leafs are taking that step back and not adding as well. So I like what the Lightning did here. Kucherov's 31. He's one of the top NHLers leading in scoring. Brain Point's still amazing. Jake Gensel's been great. Hagel's great. Cirelli. They have a really solid, good mix of players between 26 and 30 range in their forward core that are all really solid offensively. And then defensively, yes, you're right. Victor Hedman's 34. Ryan McDonough's 35. Both of them have shown signs of getting older, but you still have 27-year-old Eric Chernak. You have JJ Moser, who's 24. Herbig, who I think is more of a bomb man. But anyways, he's been playing well, 26. So, and you still have Vasi, who's 30, who's still been solid. So I think for the Lightning, take as many cracks as you can. I don't hate what they did at the trade deadline, especially when, again, you can't take any year for granted, especially when your core is aging. So for the Lightning, I like this deal. I'm also just going to encompass as well as a whole the top three teams in the Atlantic Division. I think all did really well.
Oh,
Panthers
100%.
picking up Marchand for a conditional second round pick. They've also adopted the Ram strategy of F them picks. They also acquired Seth Jones as well, who I think, although he's going to be pushed into a number one defenseman role now, with Aaron Ekblad missing the next 20 games, two being the first two games of the postseason, shores up. I think he's a solid second pair defenseman, so I really like that addition a lot too. Yes, you gave up Spencer Knight and a first round pick. As a Blackhawks fan, thank you. But for the Panthers going all in again, I really like those additions. For the Maple Leafs, you add Lawton and Carlo. Yeah, you gave up some high level prospects, at least in your system, and some first round picks. But both players have term. Carlo with 2 more years, Lawton with another year. So I think all those three teams in the Atlantic really did well at this trade deadline. And I think it's going to be an absolute bloodbath once again. For the Maple Leafs, you had to add and you had to make some moves, and shoring up their top four and shoring up their forward depth, I think were two good moves for them. Because initially, I was like, if they're just letting Tampa Bay and Florida just keep adding, it's going to be another lost year. Mitch Marner is going to go to Chicago and win the Stanley Cup the year after. So, any final winners or losers?
Um, I saved my best winner for last, and I think the biggest winner out of this deadline is easily the Ottawa Senators. Um, they get not only there's the one trade everyone's talking about is the Dylan Cousins trade, and yes, it's a seller's market. You get rid of Josh Norris, you get rid of Jacob Bernard Docker, but you get Dylan Cousins and Dennis Gilbert and a second round pick. You get asset. You get pick. A second round pick from that trade is spectacular because I was thinking it would be just straight up for Cousins, Gilbert, Bernard Docker, and Norris. And getting an extra second is awesome. Dennis Gilbert should not go unnoticed in this trade. He's a physical human being who can wreak havoc on that on that third pair. Sorry, he's huge. He's a guy who will fight anyone, and he fits perfectly into the Ottawa Senators defense and the Ottawa Senators mindset. The one trade that is going very unnoticed right now is the one that no one's talking about is the Fabian Zetterlund trade.
Yep.
Getting Fabian Zetterlund for what you gave up, pretty much it's the second round pick you got in the Buffalo trade. That's not the same exact one, but the second pick you got, you traded with that in that trade, and you get a fourth round pick. You trade away Zach Ostapchuk, a second round pick, and Noah Gregor for Tristan Robbins, Fabian Zetterlund, fourth round pick. Fabian Zetterlund's going to slot in on that second power play unit and just absolutely rip. He has a lethal shot. He's on the last year of a $1.4 million deal, so they're gonna have to pay him. But the Senators, I feel like, grew so much in an area where they needed to improve, and that was on the power play. They are pretty highly ranked on the power play, I believe. I haven't checked recently, but to be where you need to be where they need to be right now, they keep scoring goals and need to help support on defense. They need to get a guy in front of Omar and just absolutely wreak havoc, and they did that. They got Gilbert, they got Cousins, they got Zetterlund. They filled every gap they needed to fill, and they filled it with the most perfect guys at the position at least the guys available. I think they knocked it out of the park. They gave up little to nothing. Josh Norris does suck. He was big friends with Kachuk in the locker room. He's a big locker room guy. He's a great locker room presence. Bernard Docker too. He's still only 24 years old. Great offensive defenseman. Great hands, great feet. But you got so much for a push that really is needed. I feel like Ottawa is going to make the playoffs with these additions. Cousins scoring the overtime goal and getting the reception that he got from Senators fans was amazing. Or the game winning goal. I don't know if it was overtime game winning goal. But he scored the game winning. It's awesome to see. Ottawa's going to be spectacular this year, next year, for many years, I think.
Yeah, I think the Cousins Norris deal essentially comes down to Josh Norris's health for me personally, just because he's dealt with injuries in the past, especially that shoulder. He's had several shoulder
Right.
surgeries. So if he hopefully stays healthy, I think that's a good trade for both teams. I think the second round pick was a little too much, but one for one, Norris or Cousins, provided Norris stays healthy, I think both teams are gonna walk stronger with that deal. And I agree again with the Fabian Zetterlund talk. That kind of came out of nowhere. I was surprised. 24-year-old forward, yeah, you're gonna have to pay him, but back-to-back seasons for sure, getting 40 points, progressing this year, potentially hitting 50. For the Sharks to trade him made no sense to me at all, especially for the return that they got for him. So I agree with you. I really do like the centers additions as well. I think that'll do it though for the overall winners and losers little video that we're doing today, although now it's like 25 minutes. But hey, it is what it is. So, Alex, thank you for joining. Always appreciate it. You can also follow, what's your card account?
It's
Varts underscore
Varts
card.
Cards, VARTS_cards. I'm more active on there. Also, follow my Whatnot account. It's my name, ALEXNAREG. I do sell cards on there. It's more of a live stream based kind of thing. I'm going to plan on being more active. It's just that I've had really time to be active. But follow me there. Buy some cards. Let's have a good time.
100%. So, Alex, thank you for coming on again. Love talking hockey with you. It's always a pleasure. And yeah, for everyone watching, let us know who you guys have as winners and losers of the NHL trade deadline in the comments below. Be sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel as well. And have a good one. See ya.
Thank you.